Hello everyone, I am back with yet another video, ringing in the new year, almost. I figured why not hop behind the mic and the camera and talk about my top 10 games of the year. I already talked at length about these games on my podcast, Otaku Brothers, so I'll be sure to post a link of that in the description below. I talk about some honorable mentions in that podcast episode as well, including a number of stats for the games that I beat. So if you're interested in that type of thing and the games that my co-hosts beat, be sure to check out that episode. I think you'll definitely enjoy it. But I figured for the sake of my YouTube audience, since it's been, gosh, 6-7 years since I've really talked about kind of a year in review for the games that I beat, so why not just do that for the sake of my YouTube audience? Because like I said, it's been a long time, and I don't know, I kind of got in the YouTube spirit when my brother-in-law and I recorded that Christmas unboxing video. So hopefully you have a nice cold or warm beverage, you're cozied up on the couch, and you're just checking out this video. I hope it finds you well, and hopefully you enjoyed some good games this year. 2021 had some pretty banging games, nothing that I think is going to be too memorable in the long term, but you never know. We'll see. I definitely played some games that I look back very fondly of, and hopefully you did too. So, without further ado, just before we get into the list, some ground rules that I kind of make for myself when I kind of put together this list of top 10 games. And these are rules that I've kind of had for myself in the past couple of years, maybe even dating back to my YouTube days. I don't even really remember, to be honest with you. But I tend to not play too many games in the year of release, so I'm always catching up on the backlog, as I'm sure many people can relate. So it's rare that I beat 10 games in the year of release to be able to even put together a list of top 10 games. So for the sake of my list, you're going to find games that came out in prior years. I think dating back as far as 2018-ish for this top 10. So just keep that in mind. If you hear a game that didn't come out in 2021, you can still berate me in the comments and send me some hate mail, but just know that I'm probably not going to do much in the way of responding to that, because that's just what I do. It's all about having fun when you make these lists, and that's certainly what I did with this top 10. So without further ado, let's get into it. Coming in at number 10 is a game that definitely was a nice surprise this year, and that's Mario Party Superstars. It's been quite some time since I feel like the Mario Party series has captured the magic that we found on those N64 games, and even the GameCube era of Mario Party games I think were pretty special. But I think it was Super Mario Party that recently came out on Switch, and that was okay, a little light on the boards, but I think Mario Party Superstars has done what longtime Mario Party fans have been begging for. It's just going back to the roots of what made those games just so fun. You know, pretty simplistic mini games. In this one, they also bring back a number of fan favorite boards, fan favorite mini games, and just the overall mechanics of it all. I love how before you jump into a game, you can configure the mini games to be either old school N64 mini games, GameCube mini games, Wii, or an assortment of all of those. And then you can also, play by the old school rules of Mario Party, or the new school rules of Mario Party. So I think it really caters to all audiences, and my wife and I just had such a great time playing Mario Party Superstars soon after release, and I'm sure we'll probably get a few games in here tonight to ring in New Year's. So if you've been waiting for Mario Party to return to its roots, definitely look no further. Mario Party Superstars certainly doesn't disappoint, and that's why it makes number 10 for me. Number 9, also a surprise for me, because I really have not been in the competitive shooter scene in many years. I got into Uncharted on PS3. I played, of course, a lot of Modern Warfare, World at War, some of those earlier Call of Duty games on the Xbox 360. But to really get into a Halo-like shooter, it's been a while. But the game that did that for me this year was Splitgate. Many of you may not have heard of this, because I feel like it got a little overshadowed by Halo Infinite and the Battlefields and Call of Duties of the world that tend to come out this time of year. But if you're not familiar with Splitgate, it is a free-to-play shooter, so whether you have PlayStation, PC, Xbox, whatever, you can download it for free, and it really plays a lot like Halo. The mechanics of it all, the different levels are very structured very similar to Halo. A lot of the King of the Hill, capture the flag, Slayer type of matches that you'd expect in a Halo game, that's what you're going to find in Splitgate. And you even have that announcer in the background when you get like a double kill, triple kill, quad kill. You're going to find all of that in Splitgate. But what I feel sets it apart from other first-person shooters, even Halo to some degree, is it adds this additional mechanic where you can actually shoot portals around the map. So if you played Portal 1 and 2, and you know kind of how that mechanic works, where you shoot one portal on the wall, and you shoot another portal elsewhere on the wall, you walk into one, you come out where the other portal was shot, that's exactly what you can do in Splitgate. So imagine the satisfaction of sniping someone from across the map in Halo. Second to none, right? You love that feeling. Well, imagine someone's camping on the other side of the map, you shoot a portal just behind them, they don't notice you, and then you shoot a portal in your camp, and you just look right through your little portal and just pick that person off. That's what you can do in Splitgate, and it's so satisfying, let me tell you. And for a couple of months, I just kind of went into a gaming drought where, you know, we've all been there. You don't know what to play. Splitgate really came through, and I played it for about a month straight. I didn't really play with any friends. I didn't really squad up. It was just fun to kind of be matched up with random people. And so I'm sure Splitgate, up until getting a Series X, hopefully next year, and playing Halo Infinite, this really scratched that Halo itch for me this year. All right, coming in at number 8, I keep saying this game surprised me, but there were certain games that really surprised me this year, and another one is the Pathless. If you're unfamiliar with this, this was developed by Giant Squid, published by Annapurna Interactive, and as far as I know, please correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, this Giant Squid is really an offshoot of that game company's developers. So if you're familiar with stuff like Journey, Flower, Flow, things like that, the developers of that team, a couple of them kind of went over, formed Giant Squid, and they've made 2 games so far. Abzu, which is kind of this underwater adventure, very atmospheric indie type game, and the Pathless is much more of a borrows elements from what I would say Journey and Breath of the Wild. So if something like that interests you, definitely check out the Pathless. I feel like it really hasn't gotten a lot of love, and not a lot of people are talking about it, and certainly not enough people are playing it, and I think it's a very special game for a number of reasons. One of the ones that kind of getting back to that surprise element for me was that I'm not a big fan of puzzles when it comes to games. You know, you look at stuff like Tomb Raider, Uncharted, and even The Legend of Zelda, some of those more environmental puzzles I'm okay with, but even when I'm playing something like Uncharted, I feel like sometimes the puzzles can bog down the experience where it's just like, I want to just shoot people. You know, I want to run around and, you know, continue to increase the body count that Nathan Drake is known for. But I feel like puzzles can sometimes get in the way of that. But I really challenged myself with the Pathless to focus on the puzzles, not look up a guide on how to solve them. And it was just so rewarding and satisfying because the puzzles are relatively simplistic, and I would kind of liken them to stuff like you'll find in Breath of the Wild with shrines. They're pretty quick, they're relatively easy, they don't really differentiate themselves much once you learn how to do the 5 to 6 different ways of solving a puzzle, and you know, what's really the puzzles are focused around is using your bow and arrow. And as you navigate the world, you also use your bow and arrow. There are these little diamonds in the sky that you shoot, and as you shoot those diamonds, you accelerate your movement around the world. You move faster, so there's no real run button. It's you shooting these diamonds that kind of accelerate your movement, and it's moving and navigating around the world is swift and satisfying and really unlike anything I've ever played before. So if you're into Breath of the Wild, Zelda-like puzzles, but a world building and world discovery and exploration similar to something like Journey, check out the Pathless. It's really something, again, not enough people are talking about, but I certainly loved it. All right, coming in at number 7, something that I struggle to recommend to people. I was probably way too negative on my podcast when I talked about it, so I'm going to try and err on the side of caution and be a little bit more positive with this one, and that is a game called Tamarind. Came out last year. It was developed by this small indie team called Chameleon Games, and as far as I know with this one, it was meant to be a spiritual successor to the N64, can I say cult classic? Jet Force Gemini. Of course, developed by Rareware Games back then, and Tamarind has you playing as this adorable, ridiculously cute little Tamarind monkey. You explore a variety of environments, and it's really just meant to be a collect-a-thon 3D platformer. Really stunning how beautiful these environments are. It looks mind-bogglingly good. I don't know how else to describe it. It's just very, very pretty as you explore these forest-type environments, swamp-type areas, you know, the elemental differences that you'd expect in your 3D collect-a-thon platformers. But when things get really weird with Tamarind is when you go into these warehouses, these different facilities, and this cute little monkey that up until this point is just hopping around, rolling around, collecting fruit and other things. You whip out this like little super soaker pistol and you start shooting these stupidly large bugs, beetles, things like that. It is so bizarre and so weird, and this strange techno music starts playing. And there's even some areas where it's almost like a vertical side-scrolling shoot 'em up as well. So if that sounds interesting to you, I implore you to check out some gameplay footage of Tamarind. It really feels like an old school N64 PS1 platforming action game that was remade for current generation consoles. That's really the best way I can describe it. It feels like an old school Rareware game on the N64 come to next generation life. And if you're familiar with David Wise of Donkey Kong Country fame, he actually composed the soundtrack to this one. It's very special, it's very charming, but I will say that a lot of the quality of life mechanics you'd expect to see in a current generation 3D platformer aren't really there, so just be warned. Check out some gameplay and see if it's for you. Alright, coming in at number 6, one of my most anticipated games of the year, a follow-up to one of my favorite games of the past generation, and that is Resident Evil Village, or Resident Evil 8, if you will. And I really thought this was a great continuation of Resident Evil 7's story. One of the things that I think maybe caused a number of people to steer clear of Resident Evil 7 was how terrifying it was. And my gosh, this game scared the hell out of me. I mean, I'm a huge fan of horror films, and I've gotten more into horror games over the course of the past couple years, but nothing of either medium has scared the living daylights out of me than Resident Evil 7. That game was just so creepy as you navigated this strange house, trying to find your wife, trying to figure out what is going on with this crazy, loony family that you're involved with. And I feel like Resident Evil Village, the developers at Capcom, heard the feedback of the fan base and kind of went back to... I feel like this game rests more on the shoulders from a gameplay and world-building perspective to Resident Evil 4. As the name would imply, Village, you're going to be fighting werewolves and lycans and even vampires as you explore a mansion eventually. And I feel like all of it comes together really well. The story is interesting. Like, I was certainly very intrigued to see what happened with Ethan Winters subsequent to 7 and how that ended. I'll stay away from spoilers. But yeah, Village definitely ends with a bang. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing how this kind of trilogy of Resident Evil games potentially concludes with Resident Evil 9, whenever we can expect that. But if you were a longtime Resident Evil fan with the 1, 2, 3 Code Veronica, I feel like this kind of borrows a lot of the elements from those earlier games, but also some of the more action-heavy moments from 4 and 5. So it's a nice blend. I feel like it caters to really all Resident Evil fans. And yeah, really definitely it didn't disappoint me this year, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing where Resident Evil 9 goes. All right, now we are getting into the top 5, and at number 5 for me is another anticipated game of mine, another 3D platformer, and that is Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. Of course, an exclusive for the PlayStation 5. One of the ongoing arguments right now is the PlayStation 5 worth it? Are there enough exclusive titles for the platform to warrant a purchase or warrant camping out on these sites to try to beat the scalpers? And I say for me personally, it absolutely is. For stuff like Astro's Playroom, which was a pack-in title. For some of these games that, yes, have come to PlayStation 4 and 5, but the load times, the DualSense controller that a lot of these games make use of, and just the speed of menus and how fast and swift you can move between things like that. For all of those reasons, it warrants the purchase for me, but I think in a year's time, it'll certainly warrant a purchase for other folks out there with stuff like Horizon Forbidden West and God of War Ragnarok, among the other titles we don't even know about. But enough about that. I'm not trying to sell you on PS5. Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. As someone who's been a long-time fan of the series dating back to the PlayStation 2, Going Commando probably being my favorite, the series has always been known for its bombastic inventory of weapons, the witty writing and the banter between Ratchet and Clank and its supporting cast of characters, and I feel like Rift Apart has all of that in abundance. It's a little brief. I got the Platinum Trophy in about 6 to 7 hours. You can probably beat the mainline game in about 4 to 5, so it really doesn't overstay its welcome, and to be honest, I feel like we could have had another couple of hours, a few different more worlds to explore, but the main thing I want to highlight from this game is how Insomniac created a new character, another Lombax to kind of fight alongside Ratchet and Clank, and that is this little character called Rivet. She is just so adorable, such a treat to play as, and it's truly amazing how Insomniac Games kind of created this character from the ground up, and, reading reviews, the games industry, but also friends that I've talked to who just fell head over heels in love with her. She's adorable, she complements Ratchet and Clank so well, and to be honest, I hope she has her own game in the future called Rivet's Adventures, or whatever it might end up being. But Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, definitely a fun game to play over the course of the summer, even if it was a bit brief. It has everything I expect in a Ratchet and Clank game, and certainly makes me excited for future games in the series. Alright, coming in at number 4 is another surprise this year for me, but a pleasant one at that, and that is Operation Tango. If you're not familiar with this game, I don't blame you. It was free on PlayStation Plus earlier in the year, and I knew little about it until a buddy of mine, Blinkoom, if you're familiar with him on YouTube or Twitch. If you're not, I will post a link to both of his channels below. But he asked me to play this game with him, and at a very high level, it is a cooperative espionage-themed game where one person plays as a hacker and another person plays as an agent. So I was tasked as being the agent, my buddy Blink was playing the hacker, and the best way I can describe it at a high level is one person might go into this building and they're trying to infiltrate it to do whatever task it might be. So think Mission Impossible. Tom Cruise goes into a building, he's trying to execute this particular mission. When he goes into this building, he's describing the layout of the room and saying there's these security cameras over here, there's bots walking around the room, and if I get exposed to them, well then I have to go back to the very beginning and my mission starts over. Well then your buddy behind the computer, in this case my friend Blink, he's like, okay, I totally understand what you're seeing because I can kind of see that from a bird's eye view from the computer I'm looking at. So what I need you to do is go over to this terminal, tell me the security code for this particular camera. So I'm like, okay, I walk over to the terminal, I explain that the code is whatever it might be, and then Blink enters that code into his computer and disables the security cameras so I can continue on with my mission. It's very simple, seemingly intuitive, but often challenging puzzles like that that really require you and your partner mic'd up to talk and kind of coordinate how to, navigate these different levels, these different challenges and puzzles over the course of about 5 to 6 levels that take you all in all about 6 to 7 hours to complete. It's unlike anything I've ever played, and when I think about some of the most memorable cooperative experiences that I've had ever since playing video games, I look at stuff like Rock Band, Guitar Hero, even Halo on Legendary with friends, but few games could ever compare to the experience that I had playing Operation Tango. So if that kind of espionage, cooperative, puzzle-solving type game sounds interesting to you, I implore you to look up footage of this game. It's really interesting, and what a satisfying experience it was. Definitely a highlight, standout game for me in 2021. Alright, now coming in at number 3 is a game I will not speak at length about because I'm not sure I can add much more to the conversation that hasn't already been said, and that is 2018's God of War. A story of father and son, Kratos and Atreus, going on this long trek and adventure where I won't spoil any of the story bits because I'm sure a number of you out there have still yet to play it because it took me 3 years to finally get around to playing it. But as many people have said, the combat is immeasurably satisfying. Throwing your axe, whipping it back, and just the feeling of the controller as you just rip apart these enemies. It just feels so good. It's so tight, as many people have described it. A story that I feel like beginning to end was very entertaining and engaging. Does it go on a little bit too long? I would argue that it might a little bit, especially those earlier hours that are really trying to lay the foundation and build really the idea of why you should care about these characters in the first place. I feel like it's a little bit slow to get going, but my goodness, once it does, it doesn't allow you to take a breath. You know, I mean, strap in for just a crazy final act, and certainly a triumphant finale that leads into and kind of bridges the gap between this first game and God of War Ragnarok coming hopefully next year in 2022. Very much enjoyed my time with it, and who knows, maybe I'll go back and try and get the Platinum Trophy in the lead up to Ragnarok, but definitely very much enjoyed my time with it, and if you, like me, have yet to finish it or actually play it, I definitely would encourage you to do so. Alright, my number 2 game of the year, not a 2021 release, Final Fantasy VII Remake. This is a game that I started on PS4 last year, got a few hours in, but wanted to wait until I could play it in 60 frames per second with the PS5 patch. Not that I don't think it made a tremendous amount of difference, so if you're holding out to get a PS5, just go ahead and play it on PS4 and experience such a terrific story. And I say that as someone who doesn't have an affinity for this game on the PlayStation 1, because while I remember going vividly into a Game Crazy, buying a greatest hits copy, taking it home as a 9 or 10-year-old kid, the turn-based battle system I just didn't really understand as a kid, couldn't get my brain or mind wrapped around that. So I also remember taking it back the next day, returning it, because it just didn't click with me. But as an adult, I have played Final Fantasy VII, the original, up until the point where Remake ends, because I really wanted to have that lens of then versus now and really appreciate these environments in old school PS1 graphics brought to 3D breathtaking life on the PlayStation 5. And my gosh, is it truly breathtaking, as Mr. Keanu Reeves said at an Xbox showcase many years ago. Looks stunning, and it was just so nice for me to be able to really finally understand why these characters like Cloud, Barrett, Tifa, Aerith are so beloved and have been for 20 years, right? The soundtrack, oh my gosh, the compositions remastered, phenomenal, right? And I think what was so incredibly surprising to me was how they were able to take 10 hours of story in the original game on PS1, stretch that out to be a 30-35 hour game on the PlayStation 4 and 5, and still for all the story beats, side quests, double-clicking into some of the character arcs and stories, and for it all to feel so meaningful and essential to the story. That's what was so surprising for me with Final Fantasy VII Remake, and my only complaint with it at the very end of the day is that it ends, and that we have to wait who knows how long to get Part 2, Part 3. Is there going to be a Part 4? Tetsuya Nomura, I have no idea, buddy, but I haven't played the Intergrade, DLC, or add-on content, but I am looking forward to playing that, and I just hope we don't have to wait as long as Kingdom Hearts fans had to wait between Kingdom Hearts 2 and 3, because speaking on behalf as one of the biggest Kingdom Hearts fan, that was painful. And so I hope for really diehard Final Fantasy VII fans, we don't have to wait 15 years, 14 years, whatever it was, for the follow-up Part 2 of this grand adventure. But I'm very much anticipating it. Final Fantasy VII Remake did not disappoint in any regard, and I can't wait till Part 2. Alright, and last but certainly not least, my 2021 Game of the Year, also my most anticipated game coming into the year, It was delayed a few times, and I'm so glad the team at Ember Labs did until the game was finished. That's Cana, Bridge of Spirits, my 2021 Game of the Year. Wow, what a special game developed by this small little studio, Ember Labs, two brothers with this really unique idea with this young girl named Cana, the main protagonist. She's kind of this spirit guide, and she has these little friends called Rot. If you've seen gameplay footage, you know how stupidly adorable these little guys are. And you go on an adventure that's very similar to something like Avatar: The Last Airbender, or like some kind of Studio Ghibli film. It's very Miyazaki-like in that regard. But what a heartfelt, wholesome little game. Deceptively challenging. Like, on the outside looking in, this game looks like something that would be very kid-friendly, but I'm telling you, even on the easiest difficulty, some of those bosses, borderline Dark Souls levels of difficulty, if I'm being honest. But what a terrific game. Exceeded my expectations in some regards, certainly met them and most of others. And I saw a lot of people, mainly critics, kind of talking about this game and comparing it to kind of a THQ licensed 3D platformer that may have came out on the PS2, GameCube, Xbox era, and remade for current generation consoles. I feel like that is just really doing the game such a disservice, because I do feel like it's so much more than that, especially when you take into account that this development team, Ember Labs, was such a small studio. I really feel like they created something very special here, and the animation is absolutely stunning. If you're familiar with Ember Labs, a couple years back, I'm not entirely sure, they created a Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask short. I think it was like a maybe 10 to 20 minute animated mini film, if you will, around Majora's Mask. And so the development team definitely has a track record and a history with stunning animation, and that certainly comes to life in Cana Bridge of Spirits with the cutscenes. And like I said, a very heartfelt adventure. I feel like a lot of the navigating the world, wall climbing, upgrading your main character, some of those mechanics can certainly use some polish, and kind of double-clicking into them and getting them a bit better in future installments with either this series or other games that Ember Labs might have in development in the future. But for a first outing, for a very small team, I thought they knocked it out of the park. Like I said, met my expectations, and in other cases exceeded them. Also, a terrific soundtrack, my goodness. One of my favorite soundtracks of the year for sure. So you can get Cana Bridge of Spirits on both PS4 and PS5. You're going to run into some frame rate stuff if you play on the PS4, but the combat and everything else on PS5 runs really silky smooth, and my gosh, what a special game. And like I said, I cannot wait to see what Ember Labs has in store in the future. Really, really great stuff, and that's why it is my #1 game of the year. But as we come to a close here, I would love for all of you to write in the comments, what were some of your standout titles this year? Whether they were games from this year or not, I'd love to hear if you have any recommendations for me. What were some of your favorites from the year? And maybe I inspired you or encouraged you to check out games like the Pathless or Tamarind, Operation Tango, games that I feel like have really snuck under the radar, but more people should be checking out. So thank you everyone so much for watching. Happy New Year, if this finds you on New Year's Eve or potentially just over the cusp into 2022. And maybe you'll see more Ari Lewis 2011 videos into the next year. We'll see. No promises. All right, take care, everyone. We'll see you next time.